Okay, so I've been playing Path of Exile. If I type /play, the amount of time I have in it is 1 day, 22 hours, 52 minutes. I am playing Titan Warrior, which is kind of known for being one of the slower classes. I am in maps. I've done a decent amount of maps. I have not killed like the Giga Pinnacle boss. I don't think anyone in the world literally has at this point. I've got a build that like I'm somewhat enjoying, and I've been trying some of these maps and the map mechanics. All I've got a general feeling about how I feel about the game at the moment, my progression, and I've been seeing a decent amount of feedback, which I think there's actually correct feedback currently happening with the current state of the game. So let's break it down. Let's first talk about the things I like a lot, and then let's talk about the things I do not like so much. So the first thing that I'm going to say is I very much enjoyed the campaign. I feel like the campaign, in my opinion, out of every ARPG I've played, is the best experience. I think there are feedback points that I've seen that you can depend upon how you feel about it being difficult and people quitting in the campaign. I, for one, enjoyed the difficulty level of the campaign, but we will talk about why some of that difficulty and frustration is happening, as there are some very valid feedback points related to that that we'll get to in the cons in just a moment. So one of the first things, campaign's absolutely fantastic. I think the visuals of the game are probably the best I've seen in any ARPG. I think the skills look fucking awesome. Like, that's just one example of one right there. I'm using Sunder as a warrior, and I find it very satisfying. Shout out to the people doing the music design, Camille and his team, as the music is also phenomenal, and the people doing the audio engineering, you just listen to this, just sounds good. Sounds good, looks good. The game seems what I would consider, what should be considered like AAA quality in terms of production. Okay. In terms of understanding the game, in terms of how things actually play out, it is explained significantly better. You can go in the game and actually hover your mouse over things like attacks, charges. It explains it all to you. They also have, when you're trying to craft a gem, like some recommended setups, etc. It's now sorted by weapons instead of class. So you can understand that certain weapons, do certain things. Not all of these are actually built out yet. There is a significant amount of content still coming into the game. The passive tree, in my opinion, is simpler than Path of Exile 1. I saw some people saying that it looks, more complicated or bigger, than Path of Exile 1. I think it's actually fairly simple. Most of these nodes are just like percentage increases. There are still like key notables that fundamentally change the way your character can function. But for the most bit, I think this is significantly more accessible. So another pro in the game, in my opinion, is the ability for people to pick up the game that have not played Path of Exile before and enjoy the game. I have streamed, other than like just a few hours of sleep here and there, I basically streamed this game nonstop since the beginning. The majority of the people that I have seen that are playing this game, that are in my chat, have been saying that they are able to at least understand it. It is not the same response I'm seeing from Path of Exile 1, where people pick it up and they're like, I don't even know what's going on, and they don't want to play it. So you have basically a breakdown of visual and audio that sucks people in, pretty good boss fights and campaign, and then they actually explain things to you. My buddy Kyer, he drove out here in order to be able to play with me as well. We did a LAN party, and he's completely blind to the game. He didn't look up guides or anything like that. He played Path of Exile for like a few hours, and Path of Exile 1 doesn't really know anything. And he was blasting through the campaign. I mean, arguably he was going faster than I was. Obviously, he's using Mercenary, but still, he was going very fast. Chat says they thought he was doing fantastic. He streamed for a few hours over here. And, he says that he didn't look anything up, and he was able to just pick it up with basic knowledge of the game as well. So I've seen firsthand people new to the game, they've only played some ARPGs, being able to understand it. So I think that is one solution they have done with the game that is vastly improved. Now, I will say that when we start getting to understanding the game, etc., that part of the reason that we probably are seeing it being a little bit easier to understand is, in my opinion, your amount of variety in terms of skills build are more limited now. If we go to support gyms, they have recommended that shows, but if we show like all gyms here, there's actually not that many support gyms. This looks like a lot, but like it's actually not that crazy, to be honest, especially when you start considering like I'm using melee. So if I just type in like melee or something, then we start seeing that there's not like actually just a whole ton of support gyms in this system. So when you look through the options, it's like, okay, maybe I have 10 valid options for something I'm using. That's fairly manageable as opposed to like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, or or something like that. So that's part of the reason I think it's more easy to understand. There was a concept called bloat in Path of Exile 1 from 10 years of content being created, and there's just basically less options currently available. Plus, if you actually look at the way the gyms work, they are broken down by weapons. There are less weapons currently in the game. They are still coming. Again, limiting your options, so it's more accessible because the variety of choice and the illusion of choice is a little bit simpler. There was a poll done a long time ago about consumer choice in which consumers are actually happier, and this isn't related to games, this is related to like products in a retail store, that when you're in a store and you're offered two options, blue or red, for instance, the consumer is often more happy with that instead of like having a whole aisle of like 500 different colors. The people will come out happier with very simple options. And so I think we're seeing a little bit of a byproduct of players being able to both understand and play the game just due to, honestly, less choice. Paralysis by analysis is not as large of a deal in this game, at least in my own personal opinion. I think this will expand out as people learn the game, and obviously as they are adding more of both these ascensions, as we have less than half of the total ascensions that will be in the game, as well as more variety of weapons. So that is something that I think they've done very well. Now we're going to get into a bit of the feedback in which I believe is correct, and I think there are some things that need to change about the game in order to keep most people, in my opinion, happy or to continue to play the game. Now, as I showed you earlier, if I type /play, I have 1 day, 22 hours, 58 minutes in here, and I do have some decent gear, at least gear that I am satisfied with for the moment. I have not maxed resistances, but I have some HP, level 73. I'm able to go through my maps, etc. I am still dying, but I'm using a very, this attack takes like basically 3 seconds to hit. So what happens is I'll die to the hit, but that's sort of besides the point. I will say this. If we look at my currency and we see how much currency acquisition I currently have, I have 0 Exalt orbs. I got my first Exalt orb. If you don't know what Exalt does, it basically adds another stat line onto your rare item. This is very important, and I'll explain why later. But if you actually look at my currency, I have lots of things to make magic items and barely anything to modify rare items. So I basically right now am in a position I can craft exactly 0 pieces of gear without going out and farming. Now, in their earlier presentations and when they were explaining how the game wanted it to be, they actually used a line in which they stated, if you're not getting multiple Exile orbs by Act 1, then we have messed up. And if that is how they actually truly feel, then in my opinion, the current balance, at least of Exile orbs in particular, they have in fact messed up, because I was almost level 40, I believe, or almost completed with the first iteration of the campaign before I even got my first Exile orb. So because of this, the ability for me to get a rare item, like make a rare item, and I'll just show you how actually the process of making an item goes real quick, just for the people that are really like not on the same page yet. I'll just buy an item. So let's say I wanted to craft this item right here. Okay, I have this magic item. I would use this, and I made this magic. It was just a base item, so it has that. And now I'm going to add another magic step by using the augment. And then let's say I want to make that rare because I really liked it. I would use a regal. And then let's say I really like that. At this point, I could use Exalt orbs to add up to 3 more stat lines, so I would have a total of 6 stat lines. Well, because I got no Exalt orbs through the entirety, almost the entirety of my campaign playthrough, I didn't get the process of creating a rare item basically at all. Now, I've heard, people have told me that their experience is vastly different, that they've got multiple Exalt orbs just during the first campaign. Obviously, when you have thousands of people in the Twitch chat and they're seeing this, the people that are getting the Exalts would speak out, but there were plenty of people telling me they were having a similar experience. So the fact that I can get to that far in the game without effectively being able to do any iterations of crafting the matter made my gear acquisition feel very poor early on in the game. And because the game has not, I don't think the game is hard, but I would use the term maybe difficult in terms of boss fights, especially when you're using the class sort of like the warrior early, where it can be like kind of slow, etc. Then it does add a layer of frustration if you feel like you're not really getting any gear. Now, I will say another positive before I kind of continue my rant here about the currency is that the salvage bench is actually pretty cool. You'll get these sockets in the gear. You can salvage it in order to get these orbs to add more sockets on the gear. So if I was crafting something like this weapon, I could use orbs and add 2 sockets, which are what these are doing, which allows me to pick a rune. For instance, I pick rune increase physical damage in order to do some further level of modification of a weapon. And I will say I got plenty of runes. I never have felt the need to get more runes. I pretty much had always the runes when I needed them. And instead I was locked behind these artificer shards, which again, you get 1 shard per socket that you salvage. So if you have an item that's 2, I would get 2 shards, for instance. And I actually felt like this balance was about right. You know, I felt a little bit of pressure to make sure I would get the artificers and pick up the salvage gear. But for the most bit, I didn't really run into circumstances where this was a point of frustration. I was just like, oh, good, I got one. Like I actually get to make an orb. And I enjoyed the rune portion of it. I felt like this was properly balanced, in my opinion, in terms of acquisition, possession of the items, and actual addition onto the gear. This felt correct to me. So I did enjoy that part in particular. But the reality is, even though I feel like they got the orbs correctly, because I was limited on the number of yellow items in which I felt like I actually wanted to put the sockets on, I didn't really have too many of these moments, though I could have, of being able to add on and rune sockets. So I ended up having to do sockets on pieces of gear I otherwise maybe would not have wanted to, just to be able to get the resistances, etc. I do think this is where you're going to get most of your resistances. There isn't really as much, and we'll talk about essences in a moment, but early on, there's not many ways to sort of guarantee the affixes you want. So it's much more Gamba or RNG based. This is something that I think they specifically were actually trying to have happen in the game. They mentioned many times they wanted the loot to feel impactful with the drops, and I was completely on board with this concept because I think very often in Path of Exile 1, something I didn't really enjoy is I'm in a map, I'm killing through some mobs, and the gear that I drop is almost inconsequential in Path of Exile 1. I'll get an item, and I'm just really looking for a base, where I'm like, okay, give me a good base, maybe I can craft on that. What's this item? And almost never do the items drop that immediately it's like, that's a great item, I'm going to equip that. Like, I didn't really have that experience, I don't even think once, okay? And so when they go out and they state that what we want is for, you know, yellow items basically to drop, and I identify the yellow item, and I'm like, holy shit, that's a great item. You know, I was pretty much on board with this concept. Unfortunately, this doesn't really happen as often as you might think, because when you're actually farming, you're out here killing these mobs, the amount of yellow items that are dropping are fairly rare. Like, you do get them, but not enough at a point where it makes up for the fact that your currency is lacking. It's sort of a situation in which I think you have to choose which of the poisons they want to go. Do you want to make it where I need to craft my items up? If that's so, then we probably need more currency so I can craft more often. Also, because deterministic crafting is really more later in the game, you're basically just one time, no whammy, every time you're exalting and trying to get lucky with the affixes, which means very often by the time you're doing your, you know, second or third exalt orb, then, you know, the item might not be that good and you've used a lot of currency to get there and that might be the only currency you've gotten. Therefore, you've made a borderline worthless item. So I would argue that you either need to increase the yellow drops so that you have the opportunity of receiving an item that's better. And even when you do get a yellow drop, you still need to like exalt that item, or you need to upgrade the currency. Now, there's one other point in currency, and there's one other point in currency that we should mention, which is they also mentioned something else, which is they specifically removed one of the currency items called an alteration orb. So if you don't know what an alteration orb is, then effectively it re-rolls a magic item, like basically a blue item. So let's say that I identify this and it happens to look like this, and I think, okay, I don't want this, but I like the base item that I have. You would hit it with an alteration and it would just make it like another random magic item. It would re-roll the item effectively with magic. Now they removed this because of something that would happen in Path of Exile 1, and I agree with the concept of removing this, because you would sit there with like a million of these orbs and you just hit it, and you would literally do this for up to thousands of times until you would get 2 pieces of affixes that you really like, and then you would hit with the rego, and if that didn't work, you would scour it and do it again. But they didn't really want this to happen. They want you to like just craft the item, but actually, this same concept is basically still in the game. It's just in a more annoying thing. So basically what would happen now is, let's say I need a pair of boots, and we just happen to, let's just say these are the base boots that I need. I found these expert padded leggings. Great. These are the base pieces I need. So I'm going to add a magic there. Fire resistance. Maybe I like that. Oh no, now it's mana. Well, I don't really need mana. I'm a warrior. I was hoping to get some life or maybe movement speed, and I don't really think this is good enough because the fire resistance for low is too low. I'm not really going to regal this. So instead, what I'm going to do now is this item is now worthless. So instead, what I'm going to do is sell it and wait till I get another one of these bases, and I'm going to do it again. So effectively, the actual process of making an item is exactly the same. The only difference is instead of getting alteration orbs, we're getting 1,000,000 base items. So now I'm going to go and I'm going to look in the vendor. I'm going to farm some more, and I'm just going to try to get another piece of gear. Like, okay, here, let's take this one. This has got 26 fire. I kind of like that. So I'll go here, and now I'll do this. And erode energy shield and armor hybrid. Well, that's a hybrid that I can't use. Okay, well, I don't need that. So I'm going to go and I'm going to do another base. So effectively, your experience is spamming a bunch of base items, almost like the base items themselves are the rerolls for the alteration orbs. Now, this won't actually, again, be an issue, in my opinion, because I think there is something to be said for the experience of Path of Exile 1 crafting where you're spamming alteration orbs is not good interactive gameplay for crafting, at least in my personal experience. However, again, what they are doing is they have the drops very limited. So even in this iteration where it's like, okay, I do actually have enough transmutes and augmentations, these are slowly piling up more and more and more because I'm getting more of these than I can use on bases that are actually like a viable solution. So it does give more value to things that are like white drops, for instance, but you're having to get a bajillion of these white drops that are actually useful, and then you craft it over and over and over again. This might be debatable for you. You might actually think that these base items and this way of crafting is acceptable, but I have found the experience in terms of acquiring the base items, then just keep constantly slamming with magic pieces over and over and over again, to more or less be the same experience that it was with alteration orbs, but now you just need, 1 billion white pieces. So that being said, those are the currency-related standpoints I see. I actually think the game is like a phenomenal game, and I think a lot of the issues I'm seeing in which people are describing they feel it's frustration, lack of progression, or too slow are coming from their inability to make items that make them feel satisfying. Because when you do get an item, it actually feels like a pretty big upgrade. If your character's too slow, craft boots with movement speed. It might take them longer than they're willing to do to get this movement speed, but maybe if they had a couple more exiled orbs every now and then, they might be willing to hit it on something like that. You're not doing enough damage, craft a weapon that does some more damage. So there is, I think, the ability to speed up maybe a little bit of the process in the beginning in terms of acquiring some of the stats for people. That is up to debate. If you don't feel this way, there's a lot of people that love the game currently as it stands, and that is fair feedback, but this is very common feedback that I'm seeing related to the game. Okay, now there is one thing which, in my opinion, I don't really think is like mega debatable, to be quite honest. I think this one should just be changed. I'm willing to accept counterpoints to all my other arguments, but in my opinion, I'm 100% firm in my opinion on this one, which is when you go into maps, the in-game, okay? And you're in a map. Do you see how big this map is? I like the size of the map, so that's super cool. But they did a problem that Diablo 4 did, which Diablo 4 eventually changed because Diablo 4 was getting a lot of feedback related to this, and I think once people get to maps and start having to progress through this, they're going to have the same point. How you complete a map, you see how it says map complete, and you see how it says once we complete tier 3 maps? How you get the map as completed means you have to kill every rare mob on the map. This wouldn't be a big issue because you kind of want to kill rare mobs for loot anyway, but the maps are absolutely insanely massive and travel skills are basically removed from this game. So if I, let's say, clear this whole map and there's one rare mob left, I have to go backtrack and find the mob. They have like a pity timer that happens where if you've been in the map for way too goddamn long and there's like just a couple left, they'll put skulls on the map to show you where the rares are. And that is a nice addition, but it does take a significant amount of time for like that to actually show up. Maybe it's something that triggers off of, only having one rare left, and I'm just not noticing it. But having to backtrack, like let's say the rare mob was up here and I didn't see it when I went all the way down here. And then, 30 minutes later, it shows up here or whatever with the skull. And now I have to go all the way around to find it again. They should probably make it where there's a different something that dictates about what actually completes the map. Maybe one of the yellows counts as the boss for the map or something like that. So this would just stop a lot of the backtracking. And it's basically the same thing as like kill all mobs from the Diablo 4 dungeon, except the maps are significantly larger and also, kind of more maze-like. So because of that, this has been my major point that I think if this is changed, I'll be very happy about, because having to do mini maps over and over and over again, find the rare every time was like pretty annoying for me. Maybe you don't have this issue, but in in-game maps, I think some people are experiencing this. If they wanted to just like always show us where the skulls are, then it would be a skill issue, because I would know like I can just go to this area, then, up here, and then this area down here, and then this area, and I can kind of hit it in a row or something like that. I guess Fog of War sort of thing. Maybe they don't want to show that on the map, but it's just an argument to be made, or maybe another way of completing the map or something. But yeah, as it stands, this part's annoying. Now, they did sort of walk back. I'm assuming this is on purpose. They did sort of walk back the bricking of the Atlas thing. So you remember where it's like, okay, I'm in this map right here and it says map in progress, right? Do you remember how if you die, you just can't go this way and you have to go around it? That's actually just not a thing anymore. So you actually, if you die, you can just do it again. But what happens is, you see how this has breach? It contains breach. If I die, then the breach that's in there goes away, and it's just the map without the additional goodies. For instance, like if there's a special boss, I like doing the ones that have bosses. So if I look around the map okay, you see how this one right here, that icon, that means it has like an actual unique boss with a big health pool. So if I go there and I die to the boss or something, I can reopen the map, but the boss won't be here. The Delirium won't be here. I actually think this is a fair balance, in my opinion. It doesn't brick the map. It isn't as annoying, but you have the first attempt basically gives you extra rewards, as opposed to you only have one attempt to even do the map. So I think that's sort of a healthy middle ground, and I did like this change. All in all, my take on the game is this. I think the base game and the skeleton of the game is like pretty phenomenal. I think it's got basically AAA quality and what I would consider AAA games should have for its visuals, audio, etc. I do think that any of the issues currently related to the game are easy enough tweaks. I think the currency related issue is basically a dial. You can dial it up till you hit the sweet spot, and it's probably just they were a little scared to dump a fuckload of currency right into the game right at the start. And if they need to buff up, that's better than nerfing down in a game which there's only one league and the economy's only out there one time. They probably started low on purpose, especially when we take what they said about like how the Exile should drop. I'm just not experiencing that personally. Maybe you are experiencing it differently than I am. So I think they're on the safer side first, and they're going to crank it up. The other part is we're only a few days into what is admittedly an early access. I don't like to use that excuse when I'm doing feedback or my takes around the state of games, but it is a valid point here. We are a few days into this. There could be something that I'm not seeing here. They could do some changes. But I would say one of the biggest points of feedback I have seen is that people wish they had the opportunity to have crafted more gear and make more mistakes with crafting. Like I was mentioning earlier, they very specifically did a better job in the game at teaching you skill gems, how, they have the recommended here, being able to actually build out your character. They've done a better job at implementing this in order to be a way that most people can actually interact with the game. But I do think that not having any prior knowledge of crafting and learning how crafting works, you don't get enough opportunities to make mistakes early, to understand the crafting system, that by time you really need an upgrade, you have those options available to you, or at least the potential of knowing what you're doing. Really, you only get like a couple, you're only going to get a couple crafts like anytime near the beginning of the game. And the campaign takes a long time to get through. So because of that, I think that realistically expecting newer players that are not only new to the genre, but new to the path of Exile to be willing to play 20, 30 hours to get enough to be able to like do a few attempts at crafting gear is probably unrealistic if we're going to be bringing in new players to this genre. Now, if the counterpoint is, and I'll just say this at the end here, if the counterpoint to all of this is from the developers that, no, we disagree with you, we want this game to be very slow-paced, exceptionally difficult, we have a Dark Souls-esque, I hate to use the comparison, but it's out there all the time, this is the way we want our game, then so be it, I accept it. That's what the game is. It might not be for everybody, and I will more or less tell players that ask me like, okay, is this what this game is? I'm not feeling it. I would just tell them, then this one probably isn't for you. That this game is slower paced specifically. I believe, just due to the interviews I've seen and the communications that I've had and my experience of watching them receive feedback, that this currency problem, as well as the things like the maps with finding the rares, I think this is going to be tuned. I think these are number and balancing issues that are basically a dial. They can turn up how much drop rates, and they're just trying to hit the sweet spot. And I think as soon as they do that, we're going to see a lot of people start feeling a lot better about the game as the curve of which the difficulty ramps and the player power ramps will start being a little bit more balanced towards the player sides of things. Because let's be honest, the reason that people play ARPGs is so they can go from zero to hero and feel like a god. They don't play ARPGs so that they can have a tedious, long struggle that by the end of it, they're like, I could have just gone to work today and got the same feeling. So I think because of that, probably turn the currency a little bit up. I'm not saying to make the game easier. This is specifically a point of feedback that when I hear this, people are like, I don't want the game to be easier. I want it to be difficult. I agree. I agree with that. But my argument here is not, let's dumb down the bosses. Let's remove skills from the bosses. Let's make the bosses do less damage. I think we should take the player opportunity, not power, the opportunity to make player power should be upped a little bit so that you're rewarded on those opportunities and actually making something with those opportunities. Again, I don't think the answer to this is just go and increase the damage numbers of all of the moves, increase the base attack speed of all of the moves, make your character have higher armor base. No, I'm saying what we should do is increase your opportunity to be able to interact with the systems that make your character stronger so that newer players can get engaged with these systems, learn the systems, and be less frustrated in their gameplay. That is just my opinion currently. You're welcome to disagree. I would love to see your comments down below in terms of how you guys are feeling about the gameplay. I'm loving it a lot. You're welcome to come by the live stream and I will answer any questions that I have the answer to. Links down below. Have a wonderful day.